down to our last performer. So let's give Andrea Martinez a big round of applause.
My mother used to tell me, si alguien necesita ayuda, tienes que ayudar. If someone needs help, you help them. She never told me that sometimes you need to help yourself. I remember the last time my mother was okay. It was at my Good Citizen Award. I was in 2nd grade. I looked out into the crowd searching for her amongst the parents. Her burgundy dyed hair made it easy to spot her. Next to her was my older sister waving at me from afar. My sister resembled my mother more than I did, both in looks and personality. They were both super girly, and they bonded over their love for makeup, while I was more of a tomboy, never really worrying about what I wore or brushing my hair. I was happy to see my mom smiling for once. The sharp pains she got on her side were starting to worry her. Visits to the doctor, trying to figure out what was wrong, had become normal. The pain had caused her to miss a number of field trips, the ones she would volunteer to attend with me. So her coming to see me receive my award was one of the good days, where she could actually get up from bed and move around. My mother, being the kind person she was, supported her 2 daughters that day and took my sister to get her eyebrows waxed for the first time. My sister Anna was 12, and even though her unibrow was more like a whisper of peach fuzz, she still went through the trouble to get rid of it, a common tradition for any mother and daughter, a ritual almost, signaling a coming of age, while I had a full-grown unibrow by the age 7. It was dark, thick, and coarse. I was a reincarnation of Frida Kahlo. After the ceremony, I met up with them to take pictures. I noticed that both of their foreheads were red from the pulling of hot wax. Their freshly shaped eyebrows called out to me. I hated my thick eyebrow, and I couldn't wait to be old enough so that I could get mine waxed. I had approached my mother before going about to get my eyebrows waxed, but she insisted that I wait until I was old enough, and I always took my mother's words as the only truth. I tried to never defy her. However, my mom didn't make it that far. The next year, she got diagnosed with cancer. The first time she went in for chemotherapy, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. My dad and sister got her out of the car, and she was wrapped up in a thick Mexican blanket, the ones that Mexicans take out when it's winter with the lions and zebras on them. Only it was the middle of February, and she was still shivering through it. They were holding her up as she made her way to the house. I stood in the doorway, and I tried to meet her eyes, but they looked at everything but me, as if she didn't recognize her own daughter. She only made it as far as the couch in the living room, and she groaned every time she moved. My dad said, "Los doctores dicen que es normal, a lo mejor le dan náuseas también." And sure enough, after a few minutes, she started throwing up. The last months of my mother's life were somewhere between days like that one and good days, days where she would seem fine and we would talk about stupid things like my math homework. As months passed and the bad days became more frequent, I knew that her time was coming. My mother's life ended and my life was just starting. Puberty had sprung in most of us, causing for more unwanted hair to grow everywhere. In the next couple years, the hair between my eyebrows darkened, taking up most of my forehead. My sister filled in the blanks for me, helping me understand the changes that were happening, using up the little knowledge my mother was able to leave her with. In some ways, my sister took over for her, trying to do the best a 15-year-old could. It was during this time that I started to feel secluded from everyone else in school. The other girls in my class had already gone through the ritual of going to the salon and waxing the hair that didn't belong, while I didn't have my mom to take me to the salon. I stood out, and because of this, recess was my own little personal hell. I would sit on the red monkey bars because no one ever played any games on them anymore. The girls had already started to notice the boys, and vice versa. One day, 4 boys from another class found my hiding spot. Just above my red monkey bars, a plastic tower stood. The boys, intrigued by the view the tower gave them, piled along the border of it. They looked down on me, one of them pointing at me and said, "Look at that, it's Chewbacca. Why does she only have one eyebrow?" The rest of them snickered, while that same boy who pointed me out took out a large white eraser from his pocket. He split the eraser and began to throw small, hard pieces of it at my head. The rest of the boys joined. I couldn't move. I sat there, glued to the sanctuary that had kept me out of sight for so long. This routine continued to go on for a week. I never told him to stop. Instead, I laid out a plan to stay after school and snitch. My mother's words haunted me about helping those in need. I clearly needed help, so what was I waiting for? I remembered that at the very beginning of the school year, the counselor would go into every classroom and remind students that he was available for anyone after school, along with directions to his office. I wondered if this is what my mom meant. I decided it was time to ask for help for myself. That day, the last bell rang, and I scurried across the campus to the office. The door was open, and there was a counselor typing away on his computer. I let myself inside and sat on the chair and noticed, trying to remember the words I had rehearsed. Then I blurted out, "My name is Andrea, and I'm in 4th grade, and for a week now, there's a group of boys who throw erasers at me during recess. They call me names, and I just want them to stop." I glanced over to see his reaction. He was a huge man, too big for his chair, stocky-like almost. He looked at me and appeared sympathy, but his eyes told me something else. He said, "Well, you have a couple of options. You could try telling them to stop, because you haven't told them to stop, have you?" I shook my head, biting my tongue. He continued, "Or you could maybe just try to sit somewhere else." I thanked him just like my parents always told me to do. I left his office, holding back tears of anger. I cried on the walk back home. It wasn't supposed to be like that. My mom had always said to help someone in need. Couldn't he see what I was asking for? Hadn't I asked right? When I got home, I ran into the bathroom so no one saw me crying. I locked the door and headed straight for my father's razor. Tears ran down my red, flushed cheeks as I held the sharp blades to the hair bordering my forehead. In my panic, I soon realized that I didn't know how to shave. I had watched my father do it every morning, but I couldn't remember if it was up or down. I hesitated, but whenever I put the shaver down, I would talk myself into it again and again. I wish my dad was there to tell me how it was supposed to be, but he was at work. I needed my mom to take me to the salon, needed a wax strip desperately. I heard a knock on the door. It was Ana. I opened the door and immediately felt ashamed. She looked at me and said, "Golo, what are you doing and why are you crying, Chiona?" I kept my glance down and mumbled, "I need to do my eyebrows." She snickered, "No, you don't. You're only 10. Was she for real? Why didn't she understand? Couldn't she see that caterpillar on my forehead? But before I could say anything else, she said, "How about this? If you want, I can do your eyebrows when you get older." Finally, my prayers were going to be answered. My savior. I tried to hide my excitement and thanked her. When my dad got home that day, I told him about the boys and the counselor. He held me in his arms and said, "Ya, hija, no te sientas mal. Tú eres mi niña chiquita y no debes dejar que la gente te diga quién eres, y menos que te haga sentir fea. Tu hermana te va a ayudar." My father's words helped me get through the next 2 years while I anxiously waited for my 12th birthday to come. Soon enough, it came, but my problems were far from over. My dad worked 2 jobs, and Anna didn't have a car to take me to the salon. She tried to ease the news to me, but I yelled at her, begging for her to find a way. But before I could insult her anymore, she walked away to the bathroom and came back. "Cálmate. I promised I was going to help you, and I will," she scolded. She pulled out a shiny pair of tweezers from behind her back and signaled me to follow to our room. There I laid on her lap, waiting for the first pull. She held my skin down, but my skin was still tender. "Could you be more careful? It hurts," I scolded at her. "Calm down. La belleza duele. It will be over faster if you stop sneezing every time I pluck," she yelled. I could put some Vaseline. Mi mamá decía que ayudaba, pero te tienes que aguantar. But the Vaseline wasn't doing the trick. I winced at every yank, and my eyes watered like fountains. I held my breath to ease the pain from the plucking and only had to take about 20 breaks. After some time, she handed me the mirror to reveal her masterpiece. I took a deep breath and looked. There on my forehead were the 2 eyebrows I wanted so bad. The skin around had now turned red, and it stinks so fucking bad. To my surprise, I felt no different. I blurted out in disbelief, "Are you kidding me? All this pain for nothing. I look the same." Ana laughed as she said, "I told you it wasn't a big deal, pero la niña quería cejas a huevo." It was there that the truth dawned upon me about my mother's advice. Sometimes asking for help isn't enough. Sometimes it takes asking for help from the right person to finally be heard. Before this moment, I was never told it was okay to be different, let alone hairy, and still be considered beautiful. It took me a few years until junior high, but I finally realized that I didn't have a problem being my own person. I got into trying new things. I started listening to Paramore and Blink-182, but I also started doing my nails and started to wear makeup. I didn't want to just be one thing. I got friends that were accepting. My sister dyed my hair super black. Now I wanted to be like Frida Kahlo. I wanted to be different. Cejona pero chingona.